We thought the last letter would bring closure. Instead, it tore us apart. When someone you love dies, you expect the grief to come in waves, tears, silence, maybe even anger. What you don't expect is a letter, and not just one. My mother left us five handwritten, perfectly folded letters. One for each of us, one for all of us, and one we weren't supposed to open until it was too late. We thought it would heal something. Instead, it made us question everything we thought we knew about her, and about ourselves. She never liked goodbyes. That's probably why she left. Us letters instead of last words. My mother never talked much about death. She talked about tomatoes, about the price of gas, about how the neighbor's cat kept digging up her flower beds. But death, that was a subject she always dodged with a soft smile and a quick change of topic. I should have known she was preparing. Something different, something quieter, something written. She passed away in the fall. Not suddenly, but not slowly either. It was one of those illnesses that sneaks up on you, then takes its time. Pancreatic cancer. By the time she was diagnosed, the countdown had already begun. No heroic treatment plans, no drawn-out hospital stays. Just a short series of weeks, hospice, and a fading voice that still asked us if we were eating enough. There were 4 of us. Me, my 2 younger brothers, and my sister. We all came back home when the time came. The house hadn't changed much. Same chipped mugs, same rust-colored curtains, same smell of cinnamon and dust. But everything felt different. Smaller, heavier. Like it had exhaled and was waiting for something it couldn't name. After the funeral, we sat in the living room like strangers at a wake we didn't want to end. That's when my aunt, Mom's sister, handed us a small wooden box. She wanted you to have this together. Inside were 5 envelopes, cream-colored, sealed with wax. On each, a name written in her handwriting. To Sarah, that's me. To Daniel. To Eli, to Naomi. And the last one, to be opened together. Not before. Each of us stared at our envelope like it might burn us. I ran my fingers across my name, as if feeling the grooves of her pen would bring her voice back. We didn't open them right away. We waited until the room was quiet and the house had settled into that post-funeral hush. One by one, we broke the seals. Inside mine was a letter unlike anything I expected. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was in her, full of half-finished thoughts, grocery store jokes, and one long paragraph about a rainy day when I was 7 that I had completely forgotten. But she hadn't. Every letter was different. Every memory personalized. Her voice echoed through every page. We laughed, we cried. For a moment it felt like she was right there with us, but then our eyes landed on the final envelope, the one we weren't allowed to open yet. To be opened together, not before. None of us knew what it meant, or when before would become after, so we waited, and we shouldn't have. She gave us pieces of herself, but it felt like she was also holding something back. For a few days, it felt like the letters were exactly what we needed. Each one was like a gift we didn't know we were waiting for. Intimate, private, raw. They weren't long, but they were dense, filled with details only a mother could remember. My sister Naomi said hers felt like a conversation they never had, but always should have. Daniel cried over his, then read it again silently while sipping the coffee she used to make him. Eli, the youngest, refused to talk about his at all. Just folded it back up, slipped it into his wallet, and didn't say a word. Mine told me about a moment I had erased. A night when I was 16 and came home after a fight with a boy I thought I loved. She didn't say a word to me back then, just left a slice of pie on the counter and turned off the porch light so my dad wouldn't see. I'd been crying. In the letter she wrote, "You didn't know I stayed up all night listening to make sure you were breathing. I was always listening, Sarah, even when you were silent." Each of us clung to our letter like it was oxygen. In a strange way, they made us feel chosen, like Mom had seen us individually, even as she was slipping away. But the last envelope changed the air in the room. Every time we saw it, something shifted. We left it in the wooden box. We never said it out loud, but it began to feel sacred, dangerous even. Like whatever was in that final letter wasn't meant to comfort, but to confront. Naomi, always the practical one, suggested opening it right away. She said together, she argued. "We're together now." But Eli, voice low and firm, said, "It also says, not before. That means something." So we waited. 1 week turned into 2, then a month. We returned to our homes, our routines, but the letter stayed with me, physically and emotionally. I kept it in the wooden box which I placed on the shelf in my living room. Sometimes I'd stare at it for long minutes, wondering what truth it held that she didn't want us to read, until some undefined moment. We started texting less. The connection that had briefly flared back to life after the funeral dimmed again. We all felt it, that subtle shift between healing and avoidance, and all the while that letter waited, silent, watching, until the day everything changed, and it could no longer wait. We thought grief had already done its worst. But grief has layers, and this one came with ink. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel called. I was working from home, distracted by emails I didn't care about and deadlines that felt meaningless. When I saw his name flash on my phone, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The kind you get when you know the call isn't just a call. His voice was shaking. "It's Eli," he said. "He was in an accident." I didn't ask questions, I didn't breathe, I just listened as Daniel explained. Eli had been driving home from work late the night before, took a curve too fast in the rain and skidded into a tree. He was alive, but barely. In a coma. The doctors weren't saying much. "It's hour by hour right now," Daniel whispered. We all dropped everything. Naomi flew in from Chicago. Daniel drove straight from the hospital to pick me up. We met in that white, sterile waiting room, the kind of place where time stretches and contracts, where vending machine coffee tastes like grief, and where silence hurts more than noise. We waited, for hours, for movement, for a miracle, and all I could think about over and over again was that damn letter. It was still at my apartment, still sealed, still waiting for some abstract moment to declare itself the right time. That night, while Eli's machines beeped and Naomi curled up in a chair half asleep, I pulled the box from my bag. I hadn't told them I'd brought it. I didn't know why I did. Maybe some part of me already knew. Daniel looked at me and just nodded. Naomi opened her eyes and stared at the envelope like it might bite her. No one said anything. No one needed to. We opened it. The paper inside was thicker than the others. Her handwriting, still hers but messier, like she'd written it through tears or with unsteady hands. It began like the others, with warmth and small memories. But then the tone shifted. She wrote about something we'd never talked about. Something none of us expected, a secret, a decision she had made when we were children, one that changed all our lives, one that, according to her, explained everything we didn't understand about the way she loved each of us differently. And then came the last sentence. "If this letter is being read, then something irreversible has happened. I hope it finds you together. I hope it heals you. But I know it might not." We stared at each other in silence, and that's when I realized this letter wasn't meant to bring us peace. It was meant to tell us the truth whether we wanted it or not. We were grieving the same woman, but she hadn't been the same mother to all of us. The letter didn't begin like a confession. It wasn't desperate or begging. It was composed, almost elegant in its honesty. But with each sentence, something inside us began to unravel. She started by saying how proud she was of us, not in the way parents say it by habit. This was specific. She wrote about Daniel's patience, Naomi's fire, Eli's empathy, and my sense of observation. She said she knew how different we were, not just in personality, but in how we experienced her love. And then she wrote something I'll never forget. "I didn't love you all the same." And that's something I need to explain. The words hit like glass breaking in a quiet room. She wrote that when she became a mother, she was terrified, not of the sleepless nights or the physical exhaustion, but of being unfair, of loving unevenly, of letting her past seep into her parenting. She had come from a broken home, one parent absent, the other emotionally volatile. She never learned what consistent love looked like, only what survival demanded. So when Daniel Was born, she overcompensated, poured herself into him. With me, she said, she tried to let me grow wild, like a plant she didn't want to overwater. With Naomi, she admitted to being distant at times, intimidated by her sharpness. And Eli, she said, was the one she clung to when everything else was falling apart. You were not my experiments, she wrote, but I was learning as I went, and I know I got some of it wrong. She wrote about a night when Eli was just a baby and she almost left, bags packed, silent goodbye, only stopped by the sound of him coughing in his sleep. She said she sat on the edge of the bed until morning, staring at nothing, holding guilt in one hand and a baby monitor in the other. That moment made me stay, but part of me still left. I think you all felt that. By the time I finished reading, I couldn't feel my hands. Daniel was gripping the arms of the hospital chair, like it was keeping him upright. Naomi had tears silently sliding down her face. Eli lay unconscious in a room down the hall, unaware that a version of his childhood had just cracked open. We sat in stunned silence. And it wasn't anger that filled the space. It was recognition, because in some way we had always known. We just never had the courage or the cruelty to say it aloud. Now she had said it for us. You can forgive someone and still bleed from the truth they left behind. No one spoke for a long time after we read the letter. The silence was heavy, not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that wraps itself around your throat. We were 4 grown adults, grieving the same woman, sitting feet away from our brother who might not wake up, and yet none of us could meet each other's eyes. Daniel broke first. He stood up, walked to the window of the hospital room and whispered, "So I was the favorite." His voice didn't sound proud. It sounded wounded. Naomi scoffed, not in disbelief, but in defense. She didn't say that. She didn't have to, he snapped. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was stare. At my copy of the letter now folded on my lap, my chest felt tight, like her honesty had pulled the oxygen from the room. She tried her best, I finally said. She was honest. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt, Naomi replied. It hurt now, it hurt then. We just didn't know why. The argument didn't explode. It burned slowly, like embers under dry leaves. Naomi accused Daniel of always getting the good parts of Mom, the attention, the patience, the benefit of the doubt. Daniel accused her of never letting Mom in. I sat between them, feeling 12 years old again, watching adults talk about things I didn't understand but felt deeply. And Eli. Eli was down the hall, still silent, still unaware. We all grieve differently, but grief, mixed with old resentment, is a poison that seeps through every crack. That letter didn't just reveal our mother's truth, it revealed ours. The things we'd never said to each other, the comparisons we'd silently made, the jealousy we thought we outgrew. That night, we slept in shifts. No one really rested. In the morning, we gathered again in the waiting room. Daniel looked wrecked. Naomi hadn't changed clothes. I felt hollow. None of us spoke about the letter again, but I could feel it in everything. In the way Naomi looked at Daniel, in the way Daniel avoided my eyes, in the way I kept wondering what Eli would say when he woke up. If he woke up. The letter had done what it was meant to do. It had brought the truth into the room, and the truth doesn't care if you're ready. Sometimes the most painful truths are the ones we choose not to share. 3 days later, Eli opened his eyes. It wasn't dramatic, no gasping breath or sudden sitting up, just a slow blink, like he was waking from a dream he wasn't. Show had ended. I was the one in the room at the time, sitting in the corner, half asleep with a book in my lap. I didn't even notice at first. Then I heard the softest sound. My name. Sarah? My heart jumped. I dropped the book and rushed to his side. His eyes were barely open, his voice barely there, but he was awake, alive. Within an hour, the doctors confirmed it. The bleeding in his brain had stopped. His body was still weak, but his mind was intact, alert, present. The family flooded in. Daniel, Naomi, my aunt, even one of Mom's old friends who worked at the hospital. It was a relief that felt like a second life, a resurrection. But underneath, the joy was the weight of something else. The letter Eli didn't know. He had no idea that while he was in a coma, our mother's last words had torn open a wound we weren't ready to face. He didn't know that her version of the truth had changed the way we saw ourselves and each other, and so we had to ask, should we tell him? That night, the three of us sat in the hospital cafeteria. The food was untouched. The conversation was thin. Eventually, Daniel asked what we were all thinking. Do we let him read it? Naomi shook her head immediately. Not yet. But it was meant for all of us, I said quietly. She wanted us to read it together. Naomi turned to me, eyes sharp but tired. She also said if something irreversible has happened, maybe we don't need to break him with something that doesn't help anything. Daniel was silent. His hands were clenched. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to decide. I didn't have an answer. Not then. Later that night, Eli asked to see the letters again. His own, mine, Naomi's, Daniel's. I handed them to him gently. He read them slowly, lips moving slightly, eyes glassy. When he was done, he looked up and asked, was there anything else? I froze. Naomi jumped in. Just these, that's all. He nodded slowly, didn't press, just folded his letter and placed it on the table beside his bed. Maybe he didn't believe us, or maybe he did and just didn't want to know. Some truths are too heavy to carry when you're still learning how to walk again, and maybe, just maybe. Silence was a kind of mercy. We didn't talk about the letter again, but everything between us changed because of it. Eli recovered faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, he was sitting up, speaking clearly, even making jokes again. The doctors called it a remarkably strong neurological rebound. I called it a miracle. But something had shifted, not in him, in us. The letter became an unspoken presence in the room, like a guest we refused to acknowledge. Every conversation felt like it was being translated through its memory. Daniel was quieter. Naomi smiled less. I found myself looking at both of them, as if trying to remember who we were before we opened that envelope. We went through the motions, arranging follow-up care for Eli, discussing the estate, planning what to do with the house. But underneath, every decision was hesitation. Not because we disagreed, but because we didn't trust the ground beneath us anymore. We began filtering our words, editing ourselves. We shared only what was necessary, nothing more. The closeness we had briefly rediscovered after Mum's death had fractured again, not violently, but like frost on glass. Subtle, spreading, irreversible. One afternoon, while packing boxes from Mum's old bedroom, Naomi found a stack of old photographs. We sat on the floor flipping through them. Birthdays, summer trips, Christmas mornings where someone always blinked. We laughed a little. For a second, it felt like we were us again. Then we found a photo none of us remembered taking. It was of our mother sitting on the back porch with Eli as a baby. She looked tired but happy. Her hand was resting gently on his tiny head. There was a stillness to the image, not posed, just captured, like someone had taken it without her knowing. On the back, written in her handwriting, were the words, "The night I almost left but didn't." We didn't say a word. We just stared. The photo went back in the box, carefully, as if moving it too quickly would shatter something delicate. That night, Naomi and I stood outside by the old oak tree. She lit a cigarette, one of her bad habits she only returned to when emotions got too heavy. She broke us a little, didn't she? She asked, exhaling slowly. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "She made us real." Naomi nodded, eyes fixed on nothing. "You think he'll ever find out?" "I think he already knows," I whispered. The next day we said our goodbyes. Hugs were exchanged. Cars were loaded. Eli went home with Daniel, and Naomi flew back to Chicago. And I stayed behind just a little longer, standing alone in the hallway of the house that had raised us and unraveled us. Some truths are never spoken aloud, but they echo just the same. She didn't leave us peace. She left us honesty. And somehow that was braver. In the months that followed, life resumed, at least on the outside. We all returned to our routines, our cities, our distractions. But the letter followed me. Not physically, emotionally. It was like a lens I couldn't take off. Everything looked different through it. Our family history, my mother's choices, even my own relationships. I kept asking myself why she wrote it. Why not just take the secret with her? Why not let us remember her as we wanted to, instead of reshaping her image after she was gone? But the more I sat with that question, the more I realized maybe that was the point. My mother wasn't perfect. None of us are. But she had the courage to leave us something real, not something polished or sanitized, not a memory protected by silence, but truth, her truth. Even if it came late, even if it stung, she had always taught us to be kind. What she hadn't taught us, not until that letter, was how to be honest with ourselves, about the ways we hurt each other, about how love can be uneven, about how forgiveness isn't always clean or easy. And maybe she knew we wouldn't understand it right away. Maybe that's why she waited until the very end to say it, because the truth is harder than grief. Grief tells you what's lost. Truth tells you what was never there to begin with. It's easy to mourn a perfect mother. It's harder and more honest to grieve someone complicated, someone who did her best and still got it wrong, someone who loved deeply but not equally, someone who held on when she wanted to run. And yet, I never loved her more than I did after reading that letter, not because she confessed, but because she trusted us with it. She didn't ask us to forgive her, she didn't try to explain it all away. She just told us the truth, and in that act alone, she gave us something most people never get: the full story, or as close to it as she could bear to write. That's the thing about last letters. They don't always tie up loose ends. Sometimes they leave you with the thread and ask you to figure out what kind of person you want to be now. Not all goodbyes come with closure, but some come with truth, and sometimes that's enough. I keep my mother's last letter in a drawer now, not because I want to forget it, but because I've finally learned to live with it. Sometimes I take it out, unfold the pages, and just sit with her voice. I no longer read it for answers. I read it for presence. People talk a lot about closure, like it's a door you can shut once and for all. But grief isn't like that, and neither is truth. Some days I still feel angry. Some days I feel lighter. Some days I miss the woman I thought she was. Other days I love the woman I now understand she truly was: messy, scared, brave enough to leave behind something raw. We never talked about the letter again, not really. But I think it lives in us now, in the way we forgive more slowly, in the way we speak a little more honestly, in the way we show up, even when it's uncomfortable. And Eli, he never asked again. But sometimes when he looks at me, I wonder if he knows everything anyway. Sometimes love doesn't need to be spoken to be understood. Mom didn't give us a perfect goodbye. She gave us the pieces, the pages, the ink, and left us the hardest part: finishing the story ourselves. And maybe that was her last gift. If this story made you feel something, stay. Here we share quiet truths, the kind that hurt, heal, and live in silence long after the words are gone. Subscribe to walk with us through the goodbyes no one talks about, the honest, human, complicated ones. And if you've ever held back what needed to be said, maybe it's time.